Keyboards can get really expensive really fast, and the Mode 80 is no exception. Priced at $399 starting for the base model, this is the most expensive keyboard we've taken a look at yet, at a completed price of over $700. But does it being expensive inherently mean it's good? Special thanks to BPS Customs for sending over his Mode 80 for us to take a look at today. Remember, as always, we will have timestamps down below so you can skip right to the most important parts for you. And if you end up liking what you see here, remember to get subscribed and notified, and be sure to check out all of our links below. With that, let's get into it. The overall aesthetic of this board is very monolithic, but with subtle roundness at the corners, subtle chamfering along the top edge, and a tall front lip. You may want to use a wrist rest to get used to typing on a keyboard this tall. The typing angle is only 5.5 degrees, so it's still overall quite comfy. Case machining quality is top-notch. No rough spots, clean anodizing throughout the top case, thoughtful rubber pads at the front of the top case to combat resonance, and mounting accommodations for both isolated top mount and what's referred to as stack mount. Also absent, RGB lighting. So if you want rainbow vomit, you'll need to get it in the caps, like we did with GMK Midnight Rainbow. I admittedly would have liked to see at least a caps lock indicator though. For those unaware, top mount is a typical, but not currently very common mounting style in which the plate is fixed to the top case. Conversely, stack mount basically sets a thick piece of pour-on foam underneath a PCB to prop it up, and friction from the top case on the plate caps holds everything in place. Regardless of the mounting style, you'll want to remember the rubber plate caps, otherwise the plate will be allowed to move around. Not great. The entire keyboard is highly customizable. Unfortunately, the gray color we have today is no longer available, but there are several other color options to choose from for both standard and win keyless, which we have today. Our bottom case is polished silver, and wow, is this thing beautiful. It's a really spendy ask at $100 over a base option, neither of which you'll really see unless you're handling the board, and this thing is a fingerprint magnet, so keep a cleaning cloth handy. The bottom case also houses the daughter board for the center-mounted USB-C port, which sits reasonably low in the case and hides the connector really well. Also customizable is the plate. On hand is the carbon fiber option, which has a bit more flex than something like aluminum, but leans into a more clacky plastic-like acoustic profile. If you're not a huge fan of that, there's a lot of other plate material and layout options available, including standard ANSI, which we have today, ISO, and ANSI half plate. One cool feature of the plate is that it allows you to get to the stabilizers without fully disassembling the board. All you have to do is remove the two Allen key fasteners at the rear to open the case and remove the PCB and plate assembly. One possible issue with this is the plate only grips the switch on one side as a result of this design. Speaking of the Hotswap PCB, there's an oddity with it here. The revision on ours states it's a pre-alpha revision. No idea if this is relevant at all, but it is worth mentioning. The PCB requires the use of a north-facing switch to use the 7U spacebar and associated layout. The issue with this would end up being our Reflex linears we're building with. 63.5 gram gold-plated spring, polycarb top housing, nylon bottom, and what I suspect is a palm stem. These are also lightly factory lubed. The top housings seem to have consistently loose fitment on the bottom housings, and I observed an oddity in which the stem of the switch tends to want to wobble more towards the LED opening side of the switch. The end result of this combined effort of loose top housings and oddly specific stem wobble led to our owl stabs relentlessly sounding terrible no matter what I did to the stabilizer itself. For the 2U caps, the solution ended up being re-hand lubing each switch and filming them. Remember, we discussed in even our stabilizer tuning video that sometimes the switch is what ends up being the problem. That was absolutely the case here. For the spacebar, I had to take a slightly more extreme measure and use a different switch entirely. In this case, it was a glorious Fox switch. It's not the exact same spec as the Reflex linears, but they have remarkably low stem wobble, especially after I filmed them. Despite them not having the extra plastic legs to keep them stable in the socket, using this switch cured the stabilizer issues I was having consistently with Reflex linears, no matter which one I used or what I did to it. It's worth noting though, if this switch had been south-facing, I don't really think we'd be having this discussion right now. Unfortunately, to accommodate the 7U spacebar and a 6.25U spacebar on the same Hotswap board, one of them had to be a north-facing socket. Another problem with this keyboard was GMK Midnight Rainbow. Don't get me wrong, having now seen two GMK cap sets, I now fully appreciate their color saturation and contrast and sharp, clean legends. No caps I've come across have done this better so far. The issue with these is the warped spacebar. This would end up also making it difficult to get the stabilizers tuned, and unfortunately the warping here may cause the stabilizer to intermittently start ticking again. It is possible to straighten out even ABS keycaps. However, it's a more delicate process than doing this with PBT, and more importantly, they're not my keycaps, so I'm not going to venture to do it. It does, however, drive home further frustration that even cap sets this expensive are still shipping with warped space bars. For today's typing sound tests, we used both the configuration we received with this board as well as our house testing equipment of DCX keycaps and custom JWIC black linear switches. We also tested in both mounting styles. Comment below with your favorite mounting style. I'm curious to hear your impressions. I decided to keep this board in stack mount, but added a single layer of 3M medical tape to make the board a bit more expressive and clean up the mods. Top mount, while a bit more lively and less firm, had a bit too much hollowness for this config. You could absolutely just use the case foam with top mount, but to me that just seems like stack mount with extra steps. It's also worth mentioning that our house testing gears seem to have a bit less of that hollowness being expressed in the Mode 80, so this could have something to do with the kind of plastics we were using being a problem more than the Mode 80 itself. So let's break this whole thing down, starting with the switches. I'm not mad, I'm just kind of disappointed that their house switch ended up being the cause of so many issues with our stabilizers. And a lot of it has largely to do with the tolerances on the switch being just a little bit too loose for the combination of components we had here today. I'm quite certain there's many people out there that are using these Reflex linears in their keyboards without the issues we encountered here. But it is still nonetheless a bit disappointing. As for GMK Midnight Rainbow, I have never seen a cap set I vibed with so much and was so frustrated with at the same time. That warped spacebar is such a buzzkill in a cap set this expensive. Now, the Mode 80 itself is definitely not a keyboard for the faint of heart, and this current config definitely doesn't even come close to telling the whole story of what this board sounds or feels like to type on. The carbon fiber plate, switches, and caps all combine to make this one of the clackiest keyboards I've ever heard before. But especially in stack mount, it's such a clean, tight sound. At least around the alphas. The arrows are admittedly a bit thin. At an as-configured price for the bare bones here of $519, if that's the kind of money you're looking to spend on a custom, in this instance, I might push you away from spending quite so much on the mirror finish bottom and maybe investing a little bit more in some additional plates and an extra PCB so you can have multiple configurations ready to go when you want to switch things up a little bit. And I feel like that's the point of this board, providing a clean, mature aesthetic, tons of flexibility, and lots of quality of life features to make this a truly premium typing experience from start to finish. It's certainly the most user-friendly board I've yet built with. And as this is my personal first time using what I would consider to be a high-end keyboard configuration, this is not only going to be really memorable for me, but it marks an important milestone for the channel because this provides us an extreme end of the spectrum where we now have a little bit more context as to where maybe it might make a little bit more or less sense to spend more or less money on different quality of life features and materials. Again, huge thank you to BPS Customs for supplying the Mode 80 for today's content. And if you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. You're the real goats. Remember, toss us a thumbs up on the way out if you like what you saw. Get subscribed and notified so you don't miss any of our content when it goes live. And if you want to make a direct contribution to the channel to help us make more and better content, make sure you check out our Ko-fi page down below and be following us on social media. I do have some plans to start getting some dedicated content going up there soon and maybe starting up some live streaming. Anyway, take it easy everyone, and we'll catch you next time.